There was no word when the doors to the courtroom swung open. No word from the bailiff. None from the clerk. Not even from the handful of spectators who had battled the biting Arizona wind to fill the back row. The time was too solemn, too unusual, too monumental. This was more than a custody motion or property hearing this time. This was the first time Christine, Janelle, and Mary stood together on official record, not as mute supporters or bewildered bystanders, but as named individuals with filed motions, counters, and affidavits stamped with their signatures, not his. The courtroom itself was colder than usual, as if even the walls sensed they were about to bear witness to something irrevocable. Christine stepped in first, binder in hand, face peaceful but wound-tight, like a woman who had already traveled this corridor, and lastly ceased looking over her shoulder. Janelle came next, arms folded, chin upturned, but eyes darting along the rows for faces she knew. Mary came after them, not lagging, not hesitant, but calculated, like she'd made the choice late, but was holding fast. There was no hello, no nodding or smiling. Only the electric silence of three women who had once lived in a house, shared a dream, and shared a man. And now shared something much more explosive, the truth. Robyn wasn't in the room at all, but her attorney was already nervously shuffling papers, eyes darting between tables, as if this courtroom might suddenly split apart like a fault. And Cody sat alone at the defense table, arms stiff on either side, jaw clenched, as if containing an explosion no one wanted to witness. The judge came in, glasses perched low on his nose, his voice firm but curt. "We are assembled for the joint petition regarding the issue of Coyote Pass distribution, financial disclosure irregularities, and non-disclosed property ownership between the parties previously identified as the Brown family. No cameras, no TLC producers, just ink and hard facts." For years, Christine had produced receipts. For years, Janelle had turned a blind eye to what she saw. And for all these years, Mary had just hoped it would all sort itself out. But today, they sat. Today, they stood. And on the other side of the courtroom, Cody slowly reclined in his seat, observing them as though he didn't know one of them from a stranger. Christine did not hesitate to be invited. The instant the judge gestured toward opening remarks, she rose. No pause, no introduction. She set the frayed blue binder down on the plaintiff's table with a gentle thud that even now seemed to reverberate. The judge arched his brow. "Mrs. Brown, do you have opening documentation?" She replied not with words at first, but by flipping open the binder to the first tab, read with nothing on it but the numeral 2019. A year everyone wished to forget, but a year that altered everything. "Your Honor," Christine started, voice steady and almost too level. "This binder holds financial activity, property division reports, and internal communication never revealed to any of us, not in mediation, not in the TLC contracts, and definitely not in the shared trust agreements we were assured we signed as equals." She shifted slightly, gazing at Cody but not directly into his eyes. "Always said we were one family, but the papers disagreed, and we didn't see it until it was too late." The judge motioned to the bailiff. "Please enter tab A into evidence." As the papers were pushed forward, Robyn walked in, late, breathing shallow, sunglasses still on inside. She did not sit next to Cody. She sat behind him, but even with her granite-like stance, her gaze darted to Christine's hands like they were loaded guns. And they were, in a sense. "This tab," Christine went on, "lists the TLC disbursement agreement of 2019, the year we each got $84,000. Except some of us got less. Janelle's was off by 13 grand. Mine, 17. Mary didn't even get a full transfer. We were informed that TLC accounted for taxes. But that wasn't what happened." Christine turned the page over and pushed it across the table. "This is the email of a TLC coordinator, to Cody's private email address, stating equal payments were made. But the deposits tell a different story." The courtroom was silent. Robyn was staring at the floor. Cody scratched something on a legal pad, and Janelle, for the first time in years, leaned forward and said, "I checked my bank history last week. She's right." The judge looked up, eyes narrowing. "Let's pause there." He turned to the clerk. "Issue an evidence stamp on the TLC disbursement packet. We'll be requesting full ledgers from both Brown Legacy Ventures and the family trust account." Cody's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, we take exception to any assumption of culpability in the abstract. We are not assuming anything, the judge snapped. We are creating inconsistencies, and as it stands now, the inconsistencies are piling up against your client. Christine eased slowly into her seat. Her hands shook just a fraction, not from fear, from the sheer magnitude of being finally heard. And in the row behind her, Robyn spoke softly into her sleeve. No one caught the words, but everyone noticed her hands shake. The judge had hardly finished recording the first exhibit when Janelle rose. She didn't wait to ask permission. She didn't have to. The silence that fell was not one of form, but of expectation. No one, not even Christine, had any idea if Janelle would speak. For years. She'd been the neutral one, the one who kept spreadsheets, not suspicions. But now she gazed straight at the judge, and her tone was stronger than anyone had heard in months. Your Honor, she started, holding up a thin manila folder. I'd like to present additional financial information from my personal account. I didn't realize how important they were until this week, but they match what Christine just submitted, and they show exactly when the discrepancies began. She walked forward, heels echoing off the wooden floor, and placed the folder on the clerk's desk without looking once at Cody. This contains transaction logs from early 2019 through the end of 2021. You'll see withdrawals made from the family trust that don't correspond with any known shared expenses. They always followed immediately after TLC payments arrived. She turned around to the plaintiff's table again, and they're all signed RLB in the memo line, which, to my knowledge, are Robyn's initials. The courtroom was a sudden quiet. Even the bailiff shifted his weight. Robyn raised her eyes quickly, but her face betrayed nothing. Your Honor, I asked Cody one time, in 2020, Janelle continued. He said not to worry about bookkeeping. I couldn't fathom that he was reallocating funds for the family's sake. She shook her head slowly. But not for family, because we never saw it. We never voted on it. And when I asked to see the trust records, he said I wasn't on the account. A slow breath seemed to exit the room. The judge nodded, already taking notes. And were you made to think you were a full partner in the trust? I was told over and over that we were all the owners of the land, Janelle said. That Coyote Pass was ours equally. The judge looked over at the defense table. Mr. Brown, do you deny this assertion? Cody's attorney whispered something hastily, but Cody gestured with his hand and spoke for himself. We had verbal agreements. Things weren't always formal. So you didn't formalize ownership in writing? The judge asked. Cody cast his eyes downward. Not at the time. The judge's tone grew colder. Then we might have to consider this a misrepresentation case. Christine glanced at Janelle. Their eyes locked briefly, but it was enough for the first time. Janelle wasn't simply cheering from the sidelines. She was constructing the case. And Robyn, she remained quiet, but her left hand, clutching her purse, was unconsciously closing into a fist. Mary had been the ghost of the sister wives for a long time. She was present in name, in picture, in concept, but absent from power, from decisions, from actual control. Her tone had seldom pierced the storm Christine and Cody had unleashed, or the silent deterioration between Robyn and the rest. But today it did, and when she rose to stand, it was no doubt that the room sensed. It was a shock, because nobody knew where Mary was until this point. Your Honor, she started quietly but firmly. I would also like to make a statement and bring supporting documents. Christine turned. Janelle blinked. Even Robyn looked up, shocked. But Cody, he shut his eyes for a moment, as if he knew what was about to happen and was already preparing himself. Mary strode forward, cradling a white folder with one label, 2017 Separation Documents Unofficial. This, she said, setting it down, is a printed email exchange between me and Mr. Brown about my financial situation after our emotional separation. We were no longer husband and wife, but I was still being required to share equally in the costs of household expenses, albeit no longer receiving the benefit of the shared accounts. The judge leaned forward. Are you telling me you were asked to contribute, but not given access to communal funds? Yes, she replied. And when I asked if I could put my name back on the trust, Cody told me, and I quote, "You lost that right when you stopped being a wife." The courtroom did not gasp, it pulled together. Christine appeared to be about to speak, but did not. Janelle's arms crossed over her chest. Robyn hung her head. Mary went on. I kept quiet for years because I believed that if I spoke, it would only hurt the rest of them. I believed if I swallowed it down, we could recover something. But I realize now, silence didn't preserve anything. It kept him safe. She turned and headed back to her seat without so much as a glance Cody's way. The judge changed his glasses. Do you have records of finances indicating ongoing payments at that time? Yes, replied Mary. They're in the folder. I made payments into utilities and household funds from 2017 to 2020, but I had no access to the decisions being made about Coyote Pass, trust restructuring, or TLC disbursements. The clerk pulled out the folder and presented it to the judge, who flipped the first few pages and stopped dead in his tracks. These checks are notarized, he said, and the account listed as the recipient is not a joint account. He glanced at the defense table. Mr. Brown, was this your personal fund? Cody's jaw flexed, but he didn't speak. His lawyer finally stood. Your Honor, we'll need to verify those documents before you comment. Then verify them, the judge snapped. Because if what is in these files is true, we could be dealing with something much bigger than a disagreement between citizens. Christine glanced at Mary. So did Janelle, and Mary, once so invisible, finally caught their gaze, and nodded, slowly, steadily, as if to say, I'm not silent anymore. The judge's fingers paused on the edges of Mary's documents, like he was holding something heavier than paper. Like each line, each signature, each date was rewriting a version of the family he had only begun to understand. He looked up slowly, the glasses sliding slightly down his nose. This court has now received 3 independent submissions, he said firmly, each indicating repeated patterns of financial exclusion, trust misrepresentation, and concealment of assets. His tone changed, not to fury, but to accuracy. The voice of a man prepared to begin stripping away masks. I am officially directing a 72-hour freeze on all Brown family assets tied to the Coyote Pass property, Brown Legacy Ventures, LLC, and the Robyn Trust. Robyn jumped visibly across the room. Cody's hand tightened around the pen in his grip until the plastic snapped with a soft pop. Christine was extremely motionless. The judge went on. This encompasses freezes on all related sales of property, withdrawals from accounts, and contract negotiations. All financial activity from the identified entities will now be under court oversight. Cody's attorney jumped to their feet. Your Honor, respectfully, this is premature. Sit down, broke the judge in a firm but calm tone. I said supervision, not seizure. If your client has nothing to hide, then this should be a non-issue. A change in the air in the courtroom now, not tension alone, but momentum. The 3 women who had previously sat apart by emotion, by jealousy, by the unspoken warfare of polygamy, now seemed like partners. Christine turned a page in her binder. Janelle placed her fingers on a folder marked Coyote LLC No. 2. Mary had her hands clasped in her lap, but her eyes never left Cody. The judge addressed the clerk. Has the financial forensic team been pre-cleared for immediate review? Yes, Your Honor, the clerk replied. They're standing by. Cody finally spoke. This is ridiculous, he snapped, his voice low but boiling. This is not justice. This is a coordinated attack. Christine looked up, and her voice was quiet. It's not an attack, Cody. It's a record. You're trying to rewrite history, he said, louder now. You are taking every misunderstanding, every choice I had to make in this family, and turning it to make me appear like somewhat, Janelle interrupted. Some savior? Some martyr? Or some man who used the word we, but signed for everything under May? The courtroom became silent once more. Undefined Ed, the judge, didn't interrupt him. Undefined Hay allowed the air to get heavier down. He just said, Let's go on to Exhibit D. Christine stood up. Which would be the 2020 land reassignment. She unfolded the next page in her binder, the one with the gold paperclip and the one word, erasure. And as she faced it to the court, even Robyn averted her gaze, undefined because she knew exactly what was about to follow Clean Becca's. It was going to hurt them all. Christine set the map down on the table as if it were something delicate, but everyone in the courtroom could see that it was the opposite. It was hazardous. A printed copy of Coyote Pass, March 2020. delineated with division lines, color-coded ownership territories, and one stark fact that brought the room to silence. All parcels of law were tagged under two names, Robyn Brown and Kody Brown. No Christine, none for Janelle, and nothing whatsoever for Mary. The judge glanced at the map for a matter of seconds before putting it down as if it were on fire. "Mrs. Brown," he said deliberately, "do you have written proof that this map accurately represents the final disposition of land?" Christine nodded and dug into her binder once more. "Here is the title reassignment filing from the same month, notarized and filed under an entity known as Cedar Ridge Holdings, one which we have reason to believe was formed for the express purpose of title consolidation without notice to the other wives." The clerk approached and picked up the stapled paper, depositing it into the waiting hands of the judge. "And were you, at the time of this filing, made to think you were still co-owner of Coyote Pass?" "Yes," Christine responded unhesitatingly. "We had weekly meetings where we talked about constructing a home there. We discussed who would receive what acre. We even selected possible floor plans, but none of us ever laid eyes on this paperwork." Janelle rose. "I remember those meetings. I was there. We trudged that ground in boots and snow, and I didn't learn of the transfer until I visited the county office following our breakup." Mary's voice trailed behind them. "I was still paying at the time towards property taxes. I inquired of Cody where the receipts were. He told me not to worry, that it was all under one great big umbrella." Robyn said nothing. She didn't blink, but her jaw was clenched so tightly it appeared wired shut. Cody banged a hand onto the table. "It was simplified for taxation purposes. We agreed to that. You all assented." "We assented in a kitchen," Christine erupted, her voice finally rising. "Not in a courtroom, and most definitely not on a legal document we never even had an opportunity to see." The judge interposed a raised hand. "Let me be clear," he added, his tone changing into steel. "You submitted legal papers conveying ownership of a multi-acre tract without notifying the named co-residents who had financially invested in that property." Cody did not respond, but his silence was more deafening than any falsehood. The judge went on. "Do you deny the existence of Cedar Ridge Holdings?" Cody reclined. "It was a building. Answer the question, Mr. Brown." A silence that stretched out for a long time. "Number, I don't deny it." The judge clicked his pen against the binder. "Then we will be serving an immediate subpoena for all bank records, in-house communications, and trust agreements pertaining to Cedar Ridge Holdings." Robyn finally shifted, ever so slightly. Her gaze darted to Cody's face, and the expression she gave him did not say love. It said fear, and maybe just a hint of regret, because the land they'd tried to control was now turning into the very thing that might bury them. Just as the judge marked the Cedar Ridge Holdings subpoena into record, Christine adjusted her binder again, this time slowly, deliberately. A small flash drive, silver and unassuming, slid from a hidden interior sleeve. The courtroom wasn't moved initially, not until she set it on the clerk's desk and whispered, "Your Honor, it is a taped conversation between Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robyn Brown, July 2020, a month following the Coyote Pass land reassignment filing." Cody flailed hard in his seat. Robyn lost color. "This document has been verified by a third-party forensic expert. It was mailed to me anonymously following the original motion to inspect property distribution," Christine went on. Her tone level, not victorious, just exhausted. "You'll be hearing Mr. Brown describing how the new LLC format simplifies everything and why the other wives wouldn't know." The judge didn't alter his expression, but something in the room shifted. The clerk gathered the drive. Robyn's attorney stood up immediately. "Your Honor, we protest to playing audio without pre-clearance." "Overruled," the judge replied. "If it is authenticated and relevant, the court will hear it." The audio technician inserted the drive. The speakers in the courtroom hissed softly, and then Cody's voice, distinct, unadorned, practically relaxed. "We just gotta move it into the trust first, then loop it back under Cedar Ridge. It is cleaner on paper. The other wives won't dig unless they get a reason to. Right now they're too busy trying to figure out where they even stand." Robyn's voice followed, quieter, uncertain. "But if they ask about the land, tell them it's all still in the big umbrella. We've said that for years. They won't notice a legal shift unless someone tips them off." The audio paused. The quiet in the room did not. It built, grew, spilled like a realization virus. Mary gazed at the floor. Janelle's lips came together in a line so thin it was almost invisible. Christine did not blink. She had heard this before. "Mr. Brown," the judge said softly, "do you recognize that this is your voice?" Cody did not respond. "Mr. Brown," he drew breath. "Yes, that is me. And did you deliberately conceal the ownership configuration of Coyote Pass in order to deny the other parties their lack of legal access?" "It was strategy," Cody bit out. "It wasn't malicious." "But it was concealed," Christine said softly, cutting. "And it wasn't strategy. It was erasure." The judge nodded to the clerk. "Mark this recording as Exhibit E," and before anyone could take a breath, he added, "We are venturing into the territory of fraud. Everybody is now under the watchful eye of the court until further notice." Robyn blinked rapidly, her hand going up to her temple as if she were dizzy. Cody grumbled something under his breath that even his attorney didn't hear. But it was irrelevant. The truth had a voice now, and it was louder than both of them could bear. The courtroom had fallen silent once more, but not peacefully. In shock, the sort of quiet that lingers in the edges of a room as though afraid to inhale. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Mary Brown," he said, and Mary stood. Not because she was being called to testify, she wasn't, but this time because she did not require approval. "May I speak, Your Honor?" The judge inclined his head. Her tone was gentle at first, the kind of gentle that spoke louder than screaming. "I was the first. I've known Cody longer than anyone in this room. I recall when he used to speak about fairness as if it were the cornerstone of our family. When we spoke about plural marriage, it wasn't ego. It was about balance, about thinking we could be something radical and decent simultaneously." Her gaze hit Cody's. He refused to look at her. "I remained quiet when I watched things alter, when Christine wept in the pantry, when Janelle quit attending family dinners, when Robyn began receiving answers that the rest of us weren't. I figured if I continued to be faithful, I'd get to retain a part of the family that I had built with him." She stopped. "But the time I asked Cody to bring out the documents on Coyote Pass, he said to me, 'Don't you trust me all these years?'" Mary's hands shook ever so slightly. And in that second, he wasn't asking for trust. He was commanding quiet. Christine observed her, crying. Janelle leaned forward, not flinching. "So no," Mary went on, voice now rising. "I don't trust you anymore, and if that makes me disloyal, so be it. Because loyalty to manipulation isn't faith, it is fear." The judge shifted. "Mrs. Brown, are you affirming that you economically invested in the upkeep and taxes of Coyote Pass after the property had been already remitted without your name being on any legal titles?" "Yes. I have records on Venmo, emails with Robyn validating who is paying what, and text messages from Cody where he said to me, 'You are still part of the vision,'" she addressed Robyn. "You knew I wasn't." Robyn's mouth opened, closed, swallowed with effort. The judge waved his hand again. "Enter Mary Brown's financial documents as Exhibit F. The court will direct a forensic audit on all property donations made by non-title holders." Cody seemed to lean forward to speak, then didn't. His attorney leaned in, whispering angrily in his ear, but Cody simply gazed straight ahead, as though he couldn't see anything anymore. Not the judge. Not Christine, not Janelle, not Mary, and perhaps not even himself. The woman who had once stood up to cameras and fans on his behalf, who had invested years defending his absences, his shifts, his gaslighting, had just destroyed his credibility in under 6 minutes, and she hadn't yelled once. There's a point in every courtroom drama where the defendant believes they can win back the room, where the performance they've been honing for years finally breaks. For Kody Brown, that point was with his own voice shaking not out of fear, but anger. The judge rocked back, fiddled with his glasses, and replied, "Mr. Brown, the court now requests that you directly address the financial and testimonial allegations made by the plaintiffs." Cody rose. His fingers curled over the rails of the defense table. His knuckles turned white. "Your Honor," he started, "these women have made this courtroom into a vendetta circus. They're not seeking justice. They're seeking vengeance." There was silence, and then he added, "I built this family from the ground up. I bore all the financial loads while they were at home raising children and brawling with one another. I made the difficult decisions no one else cared to make." Janelle's face went white. Christine emitted a soft, incredulous laugh. Mary didn't budge. The judge arched an eyebrow. "And still, these choices seem to include redistributing land ownership, pooling money in shell, LLCs, and deceiving your wives on their rightful claim over the family homestead. Is this leadership or cover-up?" Cody's expression hardened. "It had to be done," he explained. "If I didn't reorganize, we'd be broke, Robyn and I." "Robyn and you? What?" Mary jumped in. "Not able to help herself. Built a second empire while the rest of us paid taxes on property that we didn't even legally own," Cody snapped. "You were never meant to ask questions," he bellowed. The courtroom gasped. "You think you could manage the pressure that I've been under? The show, the fan hate, the producers bringing every fight into a storyline while I managed everybody's drama. I defended this family from destruction." Christine rose to her feet. "You defended Robyn," she said in a flat tone. "At everyone else's expense." "Because she was the only one who had faith in me," he retorted. "The rest of you walked out. You quit. You drove the kids away from me. You managed that yourself," Janelle said icily. "Every time you were late. Every time you promised something you didn't deliver. Each time you've said something to the camera and something different behind our backs." The judge brought his gavel down once. "That is enough, Mr. Brown. You will be respectful in the courtroom or be in contempt." Cody was panting now, red-faced, sweating. The facade had cracked, the calm, misunderstood patriarch. The man TLC had spent more than a decade marketing as overwhelmed but good-intentioned was gone. In his stead was a man backed into a corner by the truth. The truth of 3 women afraid no more, of paper trails he could not erase, of audio recordings he could not cover up, of children who no longer recognized him as the glue, but the crack. Cody slumped back in his chair, angry and humiliated at the same time. His attorney said nothing. Robyn averted her eyes. And for the first time, the judge jotted something down with a slight headshake. Not confusion, but disappointment. Robyn had been silent throughout the whole hearing, an unusual silence for a woman who had previously recounted the emotional state of the family behind tearful eyes and confessional lenses. But now, when her name was bolded on the next evidence submission, even the court clerk seemed nervous. The judge coughed. "We will now examine Exhibit H.A., series of internal emails from Mrs. Robyn Brown to Mr. Kody Brown addressing Coyote Pass property reassignment, family trust financial distributions, and third-party communications from TLC's legal counsel." Robyn's eyes grew wide. "Not supposed to be," she whispered, but her words disappeared as the screen on the back of the judge came alive. The emails weren't only hurtful, they were incriminating. One, written in August 2022, said, "Cody, I said we can't hold out for Janelle and Christine to sign off. Just move the parcel into the LLC and we'll get the deed in my name later. Mary won't protest if you continue to tell her she is still part of the vision." A collective gasp ran through the room. Christine went white. Janelle stiffened, and Mary as if she'd been punched in the stomach. But it was the second email that shattered what little control Robyn had remaining. "We need to keep TLC content, so don't inform the girls about the Flagstaff Fund. Let's just say it's being held for emergencies. I'll create the invoice to make it look like legal fees." Robyn stood up, her chair screeching across the tile. "That's not what it looks like," she stammered. "You're twisting this. Those were private conversations between spouses, between partners trying to protect the family." The judge raised his hand. "Mrs. Brown, please be seated. You will have the opportunity to respond under oath if the plaintiffs request witness testimony." But Robyn couldn't stop now. She looked at Cody, eyes wild. "Undefined, tell them. Undefined, tell them we didn't mean to cut them out. Undefined, that this was about saving what was left, not stealing it. Undefined, Cody didn't speak. Undefined, Hay didn't even look at her. Undefined, Christine stood slowly. "Undefined, Your Honor," she said. "These emails validate every fear we've had for years. They demonstrate overt dishonesty, money management, and exclusionary planning that harmed not only us but our children. They demonstrate Robyn wasn't a bystander, she was the architect." Robyn finally cracked. She collapsed to the ground, weeping loudly, her face in her hands. Not the gentle, camera-worthy sobbing that had gotten her sympathy for years, but a complete breakdown, authentic or staged. No one knew. The judge addressed the court clerk. "Undefined, we are going to recess for 30 minutes. Undefined when we return. We will decide if we should go ahead with a forensic audit, and if a fraud investigation is in the scope of this court, or to be sent on to a higher civil forum." With the striking of the gavel on the desk, the room froze. Undefined Robyn stayed on the floor. Undefined Cody stayed quiet, and the women, Christine, Janelle, and Mary, marched out together, binder in hand, not as wives, not as television show contestants, but as women taking back what had always been stolen from them on breaths and paper. When the court resumed, the air was denser, not only with tension, but with something that seemed irreversible. This was no longer about property or paychecks. This was about intent, about trust. And now, due to Christine's dogged preparation and the binder she held like holy writ, that intent was finally going to be established. The judge fiddled with his microphone and said, "Miss Brown, you can continue with your final submission." Christine moved forward and set the leather-bound binder on the evidence podium. She took a deep breath, then opened to a red-tabbed section. "This," she said, steady voice but shaking, "is the complete financial audit I put together based on tax returns, escrow statements, pay stubs for production, and internal TLC correspondence from the last 7 years. It proves that Kody and Robyn systematically reallocated joint family assets into a private LLC registered under Robyn's maiden name, and that all 3 of us, Janelle, Mary, and myself, were deliberately excluded." She flipped the page. "Here is the deed transfer for Parcel 7 of Coyote Pass. It was first listed as a family trust asset, and it was reassigned covertly after we had signed on what we thought was a temporary title hold. Kody said it was to refinance. The documents indicate it was permanent, and Robyn's name was added the week after that." Gasps were heard again, but she didn't stop. "Here is a string of payouts from TLC, each marked as production bonus. Kody insisted that they were going into a family account, but bank statements reveal they were transferred into a trust account for Robyn's kids, apart from the accounts put aside for the rest of the family." Janelle stood by her side now. "Here is the email from a TLC legal assistant stating that Robyn and Kody demanded editorial say over certain season footage, including footage of our financial talks, which they said would complicate the fan narrative." Mary continued, "Here is the signed legal agreement Kody requested us to co-sign, supposedly to ensure the future of Coyote Pass for all our kids. But hidden in the fine print is a clause that removes all decision-making power from anyone not currently legally bound in marriage." Christine's voice cracked now. "None of us were legal wives by then." The judge flipped through the binder slowly, page by page, his silence more damning than any gavel. Finally he said, "This is one of the most thorough independent audits I've seen from a private party. If verified, it creates a pattern of misrepresentation and intentional financial concealment." Kody rose, suddenly belligerent. "That binder was never to appear in court," he exclaimed. "She stole the records from my office." Christine spun around, anger in her eyes. "You left them in a joint filing cabinet in a joint house, Kody. The same house where you said I had a future." "I just quit believing the lies." The judge waved to the bailiff. "One more interruption, Mr. Brown, and you are out of this courtroom." But Kody did not sit. He glared at Christine, then Janelle, then Mary. "You all wanted me to fail," he spat. "You were waiting for this day." Mary replied softly, "No, Kody, we hoped it would never arrive. But you ensured it did." What followed wasn't in any script, and TLC's cameras weren't even rolling. But the recorder of the court was, and what it recorded in the last minutes of the trial would turn everything around. The judge set the binder on his desk and exhaled deeply. "This case now moves past division of property. It enters into possible civil fraud. I am seeking an emergency injunction against any further transfers or sales of Coyote Pass. In addition, I am submitting the financial discrepancies presented in this binder to the State Attorney General's office for formal investigation." The courtroom erupted into muttering. Robyn's hands shot to her mouth. Kody slid into his chair as if the burden of centuries had suddenly fallen upon his shoulders, and the women, they stood straighter, not pride, but vindication that only truth can provide. The judge's last gavel bang wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The silence it demanded had more impact than any outburst Cody could muster, more tears than Robyn could cry. The courtroom had just seen the dismantling of an empire, not a media empire, but a personal one based on the illusion of unity, spiritual contracts, and decades of deflected accountability. The judge folded his arms and addressed the microphone directly. This court finds that there is adequate cause to grant a temporary injunction against the use, sale, or financial reassignment of any property of Coyote Pass until a complete forensic analysis is finished. In addition, based on the evidence presented, I am referring this case to the Arizona Attorney General's office for possible civil fraud actions against Mr. Kody Brown and Mrs. Robyn Brown. The words seemed to linger in the air. Cody appeared to have aged a decade in a decade. Robyn sat immobile, streaks of mascara down her face, her lips quivering. She whispered, "We were the family," but no one reacted. TLC's lawyers folded up unnoticed in the back pew, no doubt tabulating the repercussions of this very life scandal that had developed far past the limits of entertainment. But front and center were Christine, Janelle, and Mary, united for the first time in years, not as co-wives, but as co-plaintiffs, as survivors, and as women, who just shattered the cornerstone their lives were founded upon. The media would spin it, of course. TMZ would headline, "Reality Courtroom Bombshell, Cody's Empire Crashes Under Christine's Binder." Twitter would be trending with number Coyote Crash and number Binder Justice by evening. TLC would issue a cryptic statement regarding showing respect for the legal process. But those headlines couldn't describe the actual moment, the hushed, potent reckoning of three women who had once lived in the shadows of spiritual polygamy, now standing in the floodlights of truth. As they left the courtroom, reporters yelled for replies. "Christine, do you confirm that Cody misled TLC for years? Janelle, will your kids give evidence in the fraud trial? Mary, do you wish you had left earlier?" But they refused to reply. Christine waved the binder, that now famous sword of truth, and said simply, "We let the evidence speak." And while Cody may have tried to control the narrative for 2 decades, this time the story wasn't his to tell anymore. Outside, the courthouse steps turned into a battlefield of commentary. Fans held signs. Critics held microphones, and through it all, Cody and Robyn were nowhere to be seen. Rumors swirled that Robyn had already contacted a separate attorney, that Cody was considering suing TLC for breach of contract, that several children were now being subpoenaed within the fraud investigation. Within the courtroom itself, however, the last had already been said. There was no longer a television contract or faith that bound the family together. The family had officially become enemies of the law. And as Christine, Janelle, and Mary went off into the distance, not toward the next season, but toward something more enduring, the world at last knew them not as sister wives, but as women who had stood up, spoken out, and prevailed.